The Book of Daniel, Part 2. We had just finished up in the last lecture with Chapter 4 of Daniel, and that beautiful prayer and testimony of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, who was converted to believe in the Most High God, our Father. However, we're going to find that Daniel chapter 5 and chapter 6 are out of their chronology in timeline. In other words, as we get to Daniel chapter 7, you will see that it goes back to Belshazzar. This chapter 5 of Daniel will begin with Belshazzar and end with his kingdom being taken from him. But in chapter 7, it will go back to Belshazzar. So chapter 5 and 6 are not in timeline chronology-wise. However, it was written this way. So perhaps Daniel was reiterating some of the things that happened during Belshazzar's reign. It's not known. But we will begin with Daniel chapter 5 and verse 1. And before we do, let us go to the Father in prayer. Glorious Heavenly Father, Creator of the universe and all that is therein, we come before you, Father, and we ask for your wisdom and your guidance as we study these prophecies, as we study your word, Father. We know that when we ask, you shall give, for it is your promise. We ask that your influence, that your guidance always be upon these studies, Father, and that you show us the path to walk upon so that we do not stumble and fall, but remain in the truth of your word. And we ask these things, Father, in the name of our Lord and Savior, Yeshua, Jesus, the true Christ. Amen. So Daniel chapter 5 and verse 1. Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and he drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar means Bel protect the king. It's a derivative of Daniel's name, Belteshazzar. Bel protect him. Verse 2. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father, Nebuchadnezzar, had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. Now, if you know biblical chronology and timeline, you will know that Belshazzar is not Nebuchadnezzar's son. Rather, he is his grandson. However, in Hebrew, there is no word for grandson or granddaughter. A person is simply called by the name of a notable person, surnamed for a notable person. In other words, Belshazzar here is called the son of Nebuchadnezzar, which it says his father Nebuchadnezzar, but it simply means that he is of the line of Nebuchadnezzar. Again, in Hebrew, there is no word for grandson or granddaughter. Just as Jesus Christ was called the son of David, yet he was not his son. He was of his line, of the line of the tribe of Judah. So to continue with verse 3, then they brought the golden vessels, which were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem. And the king and his princes and wives and his concubines drank in them. These golden and silver vessels were the holy utensils that were in the temple of the Lord. And by this man and his wives and concubines drinking out of them, they were profaning them. For this he will be punished. Verse 4. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold, lowercase on the G of the word gods there, and of silver, and brass, and iron, and of wood and stone. Many places in the Bible you will see the word idol used, or idolatry, associated with the worship of golden idols, or silver idols, or wood or stone. So they're not giving praise to the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had come to understand. They're giving praise to the gods of gold and silver and brass and iron and wood and stone. In other words, false gods. Again, profaning these holy utensils. Verse 5. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaister of the wall in the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Verse 6. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that his joints and his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. His loins being loosed here, quite frankly, means he wet himself. Verse 7. The king cried out with a loud voice, the king cried out aloud to bring the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, Whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Scarlet, much like purple, of course, the color of royalty, and a chain of gold, of course, wealth. And these colors will be used again in the book of Revelation. The scarlet-colored beast and the gold also mentioned, with concerns to Mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And again, wine, the wine of fornication here, will be used as a type and example. Verse 8. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then the king, verse 9, then the king Belshazzar, greatly troubled, or then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonied, which means astonished. Verse 10. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house, and the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Again, the standard greeting for a king. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. Verse 11. There is a man in thy kingdom in whom the spirit of the holy gods in the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar thy father, the king, I say thy father, made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. Now again, like I said, this is not his father, it's his grandfather. But in Hebrew, there is no word for grandfather. There is no word for grandson. Verse 12. For as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams and showing of hard sentences and dissolving of doubts were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar, now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. Verse 13. Then was Daniel brought before the king, and the king spake unto Daniel and said, Art thou that Daniel, which are the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry, which means out of Judea? Verse 14. I have even heard of thee, that the spirit of the gods is in thee, and that the light of understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. Verse 15. And now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought before me, that they should read this writing, and make known to me the interpretation thereof, but they could not show the interpretation of the thing. Verse 16. And I have heard of thee, that thou canst make interpretations, and dissolve doubts. Now if thou canst read the writing, and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and thou shalt be the third ruler in the kingdom. Verse 17. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known unto him the interpretation. Verse 18. O thou king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom, and majesty, and glory, and honor. Verse 19. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him, whom he would slew, and whom he would kept alive, and whom he would set up, and whom he would put down. Verse 20. But when his heart was lifted up, and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. Verse 21. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild asses, and they fed him with the grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled over the kingdom of men, and that he appointeth over it whomsoever he will. Verse 22. And thou his son, O Belteshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this. In other words, you knew all this, Belteshazzar. You knew, because I'm quite sure it was passed down from father to son, and from father to grandson, or in other words, from Nebuchadnezzar to his son, and then to Belshazzar, what had gone on, and how Nebuchadnezzar had gained faith in the Most High God. Verse 23. But has lifted thyself up against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought thee the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords and wives and thy concubines have drunk wine in them, and thou hast praised other gods, or thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold and brass and iron, wood and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know. In other words, they're not alive. They don't exist. They're unreal. They're false idols. And the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, thou hast not glorified. Verse 24. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. Verse 25. And this is the writing that was written. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. Verse 26. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. And that was written twice. So, mene, mene is the same thing written over twice. God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Verse 27. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and are found wanting. Verse 28. Peres, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Verse 29. Then commanded Belshazzar, And they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler of the kingdom. Verse 30. In that night Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was slain. In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain. Verse 31. And Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. In other words, about 62. Daniel chapter 6 and verse 1. It pleased Darius, and Darius of course means Lord, to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should come and be over the whole kingdom. Verse 2. And over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. In other words, he should take care of the affairs and see to it that the king got his tribute and had no damage or no loss. Verse 3. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and the princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. Now this is going to make these presidents jealous, and the princes. Verse 4. Then the presidents and the princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom. But they could find none occasion nor fault, forasmuch as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. In other words, much like the scribes and Pharisees in the time of Christ, they're looking for a way to trip Daniel up, or to find some fault in him where they can accuse him. But much like the scribes and Pharisees, they could find no real fault, so they had to make up something, or use implication. Verse 5. Then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except that we find it against him concerning the law of his God. In other words, they're going to try to use religion against him, much like it is today. Verse 6. Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king, and said thus unto him, King Darius, live forever. Again, the standard greeting. Verse 7. All the presidents of the kingdom, and the governors, and the princes, and the counselors, and the captains, have consulted together to establish a royal statute, to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. Now this is the same kind of setup that they tried to set up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego with in the time of Nebuchadnezzar. Verse 8. Now, O king, establish the decree, and sign the writing, that it be not changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which altereth not. In other words, as I alluded to in the last lecture, when a king gave his word, or when something was written, it became law, and it could not be changed, not even by the king himself. A king's word was his bond. Verse 9. Wherefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree. Verse 10. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber towards Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime. In other words, as he did usually. Verse 11. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. In other words, they spied on him until they saw him doing this. They probably had to climb up on a housetop or a rooftop to look in his window to see him doing it. So they went to great pains to try to take Daniel down. Verse 12. Then they came near and spake before the king concerning the king's decree. Hast thou not signed a decree that every man that shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, save of thee, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, The thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which altereth not. Verse 13. Then answered they, and said before the king, That Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regardeth not thee, O king, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day. Verse 14. And the king, when he heard, was sore displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. In other words, this man Darius loved Daniel. And he knew that these men had tricked him with this decree and signing it. And this is why he was displeased with himself. Verse 15. Then these men assembled unto the king and said unto the king, Know, O king, that the law of the Medes and the Persians is that no decree nor statute which the king established may be changed. In other words, what you've got here is a bunch of lawyers. Verse 15. Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel, and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, Thy God, whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. Verse 17. And a stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet, and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. In other words, yes, he sealed Daniel in the lion's den, but he put his signet on it, and he had his lords put their signet on it. In other words, they set a seal upon it, so that these men could not sneak in during the middle of the night and murder Daniel and claim that the lions did it. So in actuality, King Darius here is a wise man, and he is protecting Daniel. He has faith enough to know that God is going to protect Daniel. Verse 18. Then the king went into his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were there instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. In other words, he worried. Even though he had faith enough to know that God would deliver Daniel, the old human flesh is still the human flesh. And when a person is in peril or danger, of course you're going to worry. So he stayed up all night worrying about Daniel. Verse 19. And the king arose very early in the morning, and went in haste unto the den of lions. Verse 20. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. In other words, lamentable is a sorrowful voice. And the king spake unto Daniel, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions? Verse 21. Then Daniel said unto the king, O king, live forever. Verse 22. God hath sent his angel, and hath shut the lions' mouths, and they have not hurt me, forasmuch as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, I have done no hurt. In other words, I have been loyal to you. Verse 23. Then the king was exceedingly glad, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. Verse 24. And the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, their wives, and their wives. and the lions had mastery over them, and break all their bones in pieces. Or they came at the bottom of the den. Or, in other words, of all those that were thrown into the den with the lions. Verse 25. Then King Darius wrote unto all the people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. Verse 26. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble for fear of the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, his dominion shall be even unto the end. So what we've got here is not only Nebuchadnezzar turned to the Lord, but Darius also as well. But Darius already had some faith. Verse 27. He delivereth and rescueth. He worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in the earth. Who hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. Verse 28. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius, and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Again, the Medes and the Persians took the kingdom from Belshazzar. Daniel chapter 7. Now we're going back to Belshazzar. So Daniel chapter 7 and verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. And he wrote the dream and told the sum of the magers. Verse 2. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. You might want to remember the four winds and the sea of the book of Revelation. Verse 3. And four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. And I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made to stand upon his feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Verse 5. And behold another beast, the second, like a bear, and it raised itself up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth, in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise and devour much flesh. Now again, these beasts are going to be symbolic of the things written in the book of Revelation. This bear that raises up on one side is, of course, symbolic of the bear nation. In other words, that which brings socialism. And it had 3 ribs in its mouth. And between the teeth of it. And they said unto it, Arise and devour much flesh. Which is what socialism and communism do. But these 3 ribs in the book of Revelation will be symbolic of 3 nations, or 3 kingdoms, which will most likely bring about the deadly wound. They will probably be 3 of the Christian nations of the world, which have been having their rights taken away from them and having socialism imposed upon them. And no doubt they will back out of this one world system and its secular ideology and secular setup. That is, until the Antichrist comes and solidifies it and makes everything wonderful for everyone and everybody, that is, those who are deceived by the Antichrist. They will probably be the 3 Christian nations, of most power, which, once taken into world government, will no doubt back out for a time until the false Christs arise, or until the false Christ comes, the Antichrist, and heals the wound. Verse 6. After this I beheld another. Verse 6. After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. This leopard is spotted. A leopard is a spotted creature. It is symbolic of the Kenites. It had 4 wings of a fowl. The fowls of the air, of course, are representative of Satan in the parables of Christ. And this beast had 4 heads. 4 is symbolic of the earth. And dominion was given to it. Verse 7. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth, and it devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. You know which beast this is referring to? The 7-headed beast that rises up out of the sea with 10 horns and 10 crowns? Verse 8. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them a little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, this horn were like the eyes of a man, and mouth speaking great things. Quite frankly, this little horn is symbolic of the Antichrist, Satan, who it is written of in the book of Revelation, looks like a lamb but spake as a dragon. In other words, in this horn were the eyes of a man, because they were the eyes of a man. That man of sin, the son of perdition, written of in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And a mouth speaking great things. It would be better translated, speaking great lies. Verse 9. And of course, the beasts that were before were the kingdoms. It was shown that there would be 4 kingdoms. And the 4th kingdom would be Mystery Babylon of the end times, which was given in the last lecture, the iron mixed with miry clay. Verse 9. And I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the ancients of days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool, and his throne was like a fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. This is, of course, referring to God, the Ancient of Days. These wheels can be read of in Ezekiel. These are those discs, those flying saucers, if you will, the vessels that belong to God. Verse 10. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, and judgment was set, and the books were opened. Does that sound familiar from the book of Revelation, around chapters 21 and 22? Verse 11. And I beheld, then because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake, I beheld till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed, and given to the burning flame. Now, this beast is, of course, the second beast of Revelation. We're talking about none other than Satan himself, the false prophet, the false Christ, whatever you want to call him, the Antichrist. Verse 12. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. In other words, we're talking about the millennium here. Verse 13. And I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Verse 14. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away. His kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. Verse 15. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. Verse 16. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me, and made me know the interpretation of things. Verse 17. These great beasts are four kings which shall arise out of the earth. This would be likened to the same dream had by Nebuchadnezzar. Verse 18. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Verse 19. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others. It was diverse from all the others because the other three were kingdoms of men. Even though they were huge powers, they were kingdoms of men. This fourth beast is not a kingdom of men, but it's a kingdom under the false Christ, under the Antichrist. Exceedingly dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, his nails of brass, which devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. Verse 20. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even that horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. In other words, this king, this fourth king, his looks are more stout than his fellows. There's a reason for that. The 3 previous kings were kings of the earth. This is a fallen archangel, even Lucifer, even Satan playing the role of Christ. Verse 21. And I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them. Does that ring a bell from the book of Revelation? Verse 22. Until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Verse 23. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom of the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. In other words, there's your one world government. Verse 24. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them. And he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. In other words, the 10 horns are the 10 supernatural beings that come with Satan, and another shall rise after them. In other words, they come to power with Satan as the king over them. And he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. In other words, he shall subdue all the kingdoms that had been before. In other words, the entire world. Verse 25. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times, and the dividing of time. What you've got there is a time, a year, and times, 2 years, and the dividing of time, 3.5 years, which was the original time that Satan was to be in power over the earth. But for his elect's sake, God hath shortened the days. It's written that it's been shortened to a 5-month period. Verse 26. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and destroy it unto the end. Verse 27. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the king under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Verse 8. Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much trouble me, and my countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. Daniel didn't quite understand all of this, even with his power to interpret, and even with it being explained to him, which is one reason why it's written of the king of Tyrus, in other words, Satan, thou art wiser than Daniel. There is no secret that they can keep from thee. Daniel was very wise. Yet even so, Satan is wiser, because Daniel was in the flesh and Satan is in the spirit. So let's go on into Daniel chapter 8 now. And Daniel chapter 8 is going to be the beginning of 2 chapters, Daniel chapter 8 and chapter 9, which speak of the abomination of desolation. So Daniel chapter 8 and verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after which appeared unto me at the first. In other words, this is a second dream. Verse 2. I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw, that I was in Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in the vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. Verse 3. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other. And the higher came up last. Verse 4. And I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. Verse 5. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and he touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Verse 6. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. Verse 7. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler, that means anger, rage, against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him. And there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Verse 8. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, when he was strong. The great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. Verse 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great towards the south, towards the east, and towards the pleasant land. Verse 10. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven. It cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Does that sound familiar from the book of Revelation? Verse 10, or verse 11. Yea, he magnified himself, even unto the Prince of Hosts, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of the sanctuary was cast down. What is the daily sacrifice? It is your sacrifice of love to God. And the place of the sanctuary was cast down. What is the sanctuary? It is, of course, the temple, the church, the place of worship. So this one magnifies himself, he takes away the daily sacrifice, and the sanctuary is cast down. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, what does the son of perdition, that man of sin, do? He marches into the temple, or the sanctuary of God, and magnifies himself above all that is called God, or that is worship, and sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Verse 12. And an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. And it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Boy, do we not see that kind of thing going on now, the truth being cast down to the ground, and that which is replacing the truth being practiced and prospering. Verse 13. Then I heard one saint speaking to another saint, said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? If you go and check this out, you will see that the transgression of the desolator is what it actually says. If you want to read it in very simplified terms, how long shall the vision concerning the daily sacrifice be, and the transgression of Satan, the desolator, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot, or under his feet? Verse 14. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Verse 15. 2,300 days, in other words. And it came to pass, when I, even I, Daniel, had seen the vision, and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. Verse 16. And when I heard the man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. Verse 17. So I came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. In other words, this is for the end times, the end of this earth age. Verse 18. Now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but he touched me and sat me upright. This is what the power of God, no matter whether it's through Christ or his servants, or even the angel Gabriel here, does. It lifts you up and sets you upright. Verse 19. And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed the end shall be. In other words, the subject is the end times. Verse 20. The ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. Verse 21. The rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn between his eyes is the first king. Verse 22. Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it. 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. Verse 23. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king, lowercase on the king here, of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. We're talking here about Satan the Antichrist, claiming to be Jesus Christ. Verse 24. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully. In other words, he's going to destroy by peace. When Satan comes claiming to be Christ, in order to fool the world, he's going to have to act like Christ. So he's not going to be coming as a red horned dragon destroying everything in his sight. He's going to be coming with deception, and people are going to believe he's Jesus. So that's how he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and holy people. Which mighty and holy people are we talking about here? Christianity. Verse 25. And through his policy he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart. Which is one of the benchmarks of Satan, Isaiah chapter 14. And by peace shall destroy many, and he shall also stand up against the prince of princes, which is Jesus Christ, but he shall be broken without hand. Verse 26. And the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. In other words, shut the vision up, Daniel. It's for the future. It's for many days from now. Many years from now. Days equate to years in this book of Daniel, many places. Verse 27. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. Again, this is why it is written in Ezekiel 28 to the king of Tyrus, Behold, thou art wiser than Daniel. There is no secret they can hide from thee. The king of Tyrus is of course Satan, the Antichrist. And as we're reading through this book of Daniel, we're picking up on much prophecy. And we're getting a very good type and example and overlay of the events of the book of Revelation. I hope you're tuning in to it and that your eyes are open to it. As always, beloved, it is my prayer for you that you will dig deep into our Father's Word and ask His counsel and His wisdom that you may understand, that you may see the deeper meanings behind these simple words written, that you may come out of Babylon and come out of darkness and into the light. May God bless you for listening, and may God bless you in your studies of His Word. Thank you for listening. This has been Just Thoughts.